A file appeared in the system. No registration, no timestamp. It had already been edited before anyone opened it. That should have been impossible. But it wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was what the edits were hiding. Not names, not crimes, connections, a map of relationships between people who were never supposed to be linked. Drawn in black rectangles, hiding in plain sight, inside official federal documents. I cross-referenced the files, different cases, different years, different courts, identical redaction patterns. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when someone is giving the same instruction to a lot of different people for a very long time. And then I found the error. One misaligned block, 3 millimeters, 6 visible letters. A name that had no right to be in that document. I checked it once, then again. Then I watched the file correct itself in real time. Someone knew I was looking, and they were already closing the doors. This is not a story about one man. This is a story about the system that protected him, a system that existed before him and is still running now. Stay until the end, because the final discovery changes everything you think you know. I didn't go looking for this. The file came to me, and the strangest part, it had already been edited before I ever opened it. It was late, the kind of late where the building is empty and the only sound is the hum of a server you've stopped noticing. I was cross-referencing archived court materials, routine work, the kind that puts most people to sleep. Then I saw a file name that didn't match the index. No registration number, no timestamp, no chain of custody notation, just a PDF, sitting inside a folder it didn't belong in. I almost skipped it. That was the first mistake. I opened the file. It was a court document, formatted like federal disclosure material, pages of dense legal text, footnotes, exhibit markers, and black rectangles. Dozens of them. Now, redacted documents are normal. Every federal case has them. Names of witnesses, confidential sources, minors, standard procedure. But these weren't standard. The blocks were too large, not covering a name, not covering an address, covering entire paragraphs, entire pages. In some places, the black rectangle was bigger than the space the original text could have occupied. Why would you redact more space than the text requires? There are only two answers. Either someone made an error, or someone was hiding the shape of what was written, not just the content. I pulled the original filing index. This document wasn't listed. I checked the case number embedded in the footer. It matched a real proceeding. Materials connected to the federal case involving Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Documents that had been partially released between 2019 and 2024 through court orders and civil litigation. But this version didn't match any published release. It was a variant, a different edit of something that officially existed. But this specific version had never been made public. Someone had created a second copy, and then placed it somewhere it could be found. I want you to hold that thought. Because later, much later, I would understand that placed where it could be found was not an accident. It was a test. At the time, it looked like a filing error, a misplaced document in an overcrowded archive. Later, I would realize this was the first signal in a pattern that went far deeper than one case, one man, or one island. I compared this version to the publicly released documents. Same case, same pages, same paragraph structure. But the redaction blocks, they were different. Not more, not fewer. Different placement. The same sentence, visible in the public version, was blacked out here. And a different sentence, hidden in the public version, was partially visible in this one. Someone had made a choice, not once, on every single page. two versions of the same document, two different sets of hidden information. That's not a clerical error. That's a decision. And decisions like that don't happen by accident. They happen when someone needs two different people to see two different truths. The question is, which version were you supposed to find? At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Then I found a second document with the same anomaly. Then a third. That's when I stopped calling it a coincidence. I spent the next several hours pulling every publicly available version of the Epstein-Maxwell court materials. Deposition transcripts, exhibit logs, civil filings, documents released in waves, 2019, 2021, 2023, 2024. Different judges, different attorneys, different proceedings entirely. And I started mapping the redaction blocks, not the content, the geometry, the shape, size, and placement of every black rectangle across every document. What I found should not have been possible. Different lawyers, different courts, different years, identical redaction patterns. Federal redaction isn't supposed to work like that. Each case has its own review process, its own supervising attorneys, its own judicial oversight. The decision of what to hide is made independently, document by document, line by line. That's the official procedure. But the blocks I was looking at didn't reflect independent decisions. They reflected a template. Someone, or something, had applied the same logic across cases that were never supposed to be connected. Same proportions, same coverage strategy, same blind spots. In the intelligence world, when two separate systems produce identical outputs, it means they're receiving identical instructions. The question isn't what was hidden. The question is, who gave the same order to so many different people? One of the files had an error, a small one, easy to miss. I almost missed it. I wish I had. I was 3 hours into the comparison when my access credentials flagged an automatic timeout warning. 30 minutes remaining on my session. I kept working. 20 minutes. I had 17 documents open simultaneously. 10 minutes. And then, on page 41 of a deposition transcript from 2021, I found it. The redaction block had been placed incorrectly. A formatting error. A fractional misalignment, the kind that happens when someone applies an overlay too quickly. The black rectangle sat 3 millimeters too high, and beneath its lower edge, visible, clear, unmistakable, was the end of a name. 6 letters. The first letter was a capital. It wasn't Epstein. It wasn't Maxwell. It was someone who had never been mentioned, publicly, officially, anywhere, in connection with this case. I checked the name against every public filing, every exhibit, every index, every footnote. Nothing. This person did not exist in the official record, but their name was on page 41, partially hidden, partially visible, like someone wanted it found, but not too easily. 6 letters. That's all I had. But 6 letters, in the right document, can dismantle everything. I wrote the fragment down immediately. Not digitally. Paper. Pen. Old habit from a different life. Then I started cross-referencing. Public flight logs, visitor registrations, donor records, corporate filings, the kind of open-source material that anyone can access, if they know where to look. The name didn't appear, not once, in any document connected to this case. But then I searched outside the case, and the world got very small, very fast. The name appeared in 3 separate contexts: a private foundation registered in Delaware, a secondary signatory on a financial instrument connected to a lobbying group, and a single line in a Senate attendance record from 2003, listed not as a senator, not as staff, but as a guest. No title, No affiliation, no explanation, just a name on a list. In a building where names like that don't appear without a reason. I mapped the connections. The foundation had received funding routed through a network of LLCs, shell structures common in offshore financial arrangements. One of those LLCs appeared in publicly available records connected to a real estate transaction in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the same jurisdiction where Epstein operated for over a decade with almost no legal interference. This wasn't a peripheral connection. This was structural. The kind of link that doesn't form accidentally. The kind that requires maintenance. People don't end up on private islands by coincidence. They end up there because someone made sure the invitation was safe to accept. Who makes that guarantee? At that moment, I thought the name was the discovery. I was wrong. The name was just the door. What was behind it? That's what they were actually hiding. My session timeout had already triggered once. I'd bypassed it. Now the system was logging my activity in real time. Standard protocol, nothing unusual. But I noticed something. Documents I had opened 20 minutes earlier were showing modified timestamps. Not my modifications. Someone else was inside the same archive, right now, updating files while I was reading them. I pulled up the document with the exposed name fragment one more time. The redaction block had moved. The misalignment was gone. The name, those 6 visible letters, were now completely covered. Perfectly covered. The error had been corrected in real time, while I was sitting there, while I was reading. Someone was watching which pages I opened. This was no longer about a misplaced file. This was active, responsive, a system that could see me and react to what I was finding. And here's what I need you to understand right now. The pattern I found in those documents, it doesn't only exist in this case. I've seen it elsewhere, much closer to the present than you think. Before I show you what I found next, I want to know if you're following the logic. Leave one word in the comments right now. If you think the redactions are coordinated by a single centralized system, write system. If you think this goes beyond any one institution, write deeper. One word. Because what comes next depends on how far you're willing to follow this. There's a term used inside federal document review, coordinated redaction. It's not supposed to exist, but I was looking directly at the proof that it did. I need to give you something concrete, because this is where most people lose the thread, when the evidence becomes abstract. So let's talk about what's actually in the public record. In 2019, a federal judge ordered the unsealing of documents related to the civil case against Ghislaine Maxwell. Over 2,000 pages, partially released, heavily redacted. In 2021, more documents. Same pattern. In 2023, another wave. Court ordered, another partial release. Each time, journalists and legal analysts noted the same thing. Critical sections, gone. Names of individuals described as prominent, gone. Entire exchanges between Maxwell and co-conspirators, gone. The official explanation, protecting unnamed individuals who were never charged. Here's what that explanation doesn't cover. In several documents, the redacted sections contain not names, but logistics, dates, locations, transportation arrangements. Why would you protect the logistics of a crime and not the people who committed it? In 2024, another batch of documents was released following a court order. This time, some names did appear. Former politicians, former heads of state, financiers, a sitting royal. All of them named not as convicted parties, but as individuals mentioned in testimony or communications. Some denied involvement. Some issued statements. Some said nothing at all. But here is the detail that almost nobody reported. Several of those names had appeared and then disappeared in earlier document versions. Present in 2021, gone in 2023, reappearing in 2024 in a different context. The same name, moving through different versions of the same record, like someone kept adjusting the frame around it. You don't accidentally redact and unredact the same name across 3 years. That requires access. Sustained, privileged, ongoing access to sealed federal materials. Who has that? There are 3 possible explanations for what I was seeing. First, administrative error. Inconsistent review teams applying different standards. Possible. But statistically, the pattern was too consistent for random error. Second, deliberate protection of specific individuals through legal mechanisms. Court-approved, judge-sanctioned, procedurally clean. Also possible. But it doesn't explain the version that shouldn't have existed. The one I found first. Third, a centralized information management layer, operating above the standard legal process, with the ability to modify, duplicate, and selectively expose documents across multiple proceedings simultaneously. Not a conspiracy theory, a systems analysis conclusion. When outputs are synchronized across independent processes, the inputs are not independent. There was one document I hadn't opened yet. I'd flagged it early, but moved past it. Something about the file name felt wrong. I was about to find out why. The archive session had now been active for 4 hours and 17 minutes. Unusual duration. The kind that triggers secondary flags in monitoring systems. I had maybe minutes before access was suspended entirely. I opened the final document. Page 1, Standard Federal Header. Page 2, Redacted. Page 3, Redacted. Page 4, 1 paragraph, completely visible, untouched. And it described, in precise bureaucratic language, a protocol. A formal procedure for the synchronized management of sensitive materials across concurrent federal proceedings. An internal document describing the exact system I had spent 4 hours trying to prove existed. They had written it down. The document had a classification header at the top, but the classification level had been redacted. Not the content, the classification level. Someone had hidden how secret this was, while leaving the content exposed. Either that was the most catastrophic oversight in the history of federal document management, or it was deliberate. A single page, left visible, in a file no one was supposed to find. And I had 30 seconds of access remaining. I'm not going to tell you who was protected. I'm going to show you how the protection worked. Because the mechanism is more dangerous than any single name. When my access terminated, I didn't move. I sat in the dark with a single page of handwritten notes. The redactions were never about hiding people. They were about hiding connections, not individuals, not crimes, relationships. Remove the black rectangles, and you don't get names. You get a map of who needed whom, who owed what to whom, who could destroy whom, and chose not to. That is what they were hiding. The public record confirms this much. Epstein operated Little St. James Island for over 2 decades, with full federal awareness. His private aircraft completed hundreds of documented flights. Partial passenger logs, released through civil litigation, include former heads of government, a sitting royal, Wall Street architects, and individuals connected directly to American intelligence infrastructure. Many of those names appear once in the logs, and nowhere else. Not in depositions, not in proceedings, not in any official record. They flew, they landed, and officially, they were never there. Disappearing from a federal record is not an accident. It requires authorization. It requires someone with the institutional power to reach inside a legal proceeding and quietly remove a thread. That system is the actual subject of this story. The internal protocol I found, the Synchronized management document, predated the Epstein investigation by at least a decade, which means the infrastructure existed before the arrests, before the indictments, before his name was ever printed. Epstein didn't build the protection. He inherited it. He was a client of a system already mature, already embedded, already invisible, built not for one man, but for a category of men. Men for whom consequences are negotiable. In Part 1, I told you the file had already been edited before I opened it. Now you understand what that meant. It wasn't an error. It was a prepared version, showing exactly enough to appear real. I was guided to that file, and the question I still can't answer is whether I was meant to find the truth or only the version they were comfortable with me finding. Go back to Part 3. Find the moment where the redaction block corrects itself in real time. Watch it again. There is one detail I deliberately left incomplete. It changes the interpretation of everything after it. When you find it, leave one comment, your theory, one sentence. Who do you think those 6 letters belong to? Because I haven't told you yet. They released the documents. They just never released the meaning. And right now, in a sealed archive, in a file with no registration number, the pattern is still running. It never stopped.